This is the Presidio Soccer Organization Penetration Testing Debrief by Julie Liu. This is being presented December 6th, 2019. So in the month of November, the company called No Exploit did a pen test of the Presidio Soccer Organization's scoped network segment. In this presentation, we are going to cover the following topics: goals and scope, summary, the attack narrative and events, threat modeling, lessons learned, and next steps. So Presidio Soccer Organization had several goals. The organization is planning to migrate an existing system onto a new platform. But before they migrate to this new platform, they want to make sure that all their network servers are secure. The new platform is going to require 3 network servers, and due to the sensitivity of data, the new platform is going to be scoped to hold all the sensitive data, including birth certificates, social security numbers, birth dates, parents' names, last names, cell phone numbers, etc. So the platform must be really secure in order for the organization to feel comfortable to migrate their existing systems onto it. The organization plans to roll out this new platform in the fall of 2020. No Exploit pen testing company has the capabilities to offer Presidio Soccer Organization the services they need. What we do is specialize in providing comprehensive pen testing services. All of our testers are IACRB board certified. We've been around since 2004, and we work with businesses large and small. Some of our larger clients include Disney, Coca-Cola, Walmart, and more. In addition, we have the capability to provide remediation services. Testing objectives and scope. So the objectives of this pen test are to investigate and enact attacks that can prove that we can exfiltrate sensitive data off the networked segment. We will perform these tests on the 10.0.42.0/26 network segment only. We will not test anything else that might be connected to this network segment, such as extraneous devices, phones, iPads, and such. We will limit our testing time to 2 weeks. In order to accomplish the tests, Presidio Organization will provision us 1 dedicated IP address that we will use in testing. They are not going to provide any more information about their network other than giving us the 1 IP address, which will be at 10.0.4.4. So let's talk about the overview, or the strengths, weaknesses, and issues we have discovered in our test. So the strengths we found for the organization is that we are happy to see that Presidio is being very proactive. They are performing this pen test before they even go live with any of their new platforms. The organization maintains a 3-tiered segmented network broken into a LAN, a DMZ, and a completely public network. We found no unaccounted for devices on the scoped network segment, and we found that all the USB ports were disabled on the servers, eliminating 1 vulnerability right off the bat. We found several weaknesses in the system. The area of patching and maintenance, we found that many of the servers were missing patches and had outdated operating systems. We also found some of the servers running extraneous services that didn't even seem to be relevant to the organization's business. These vulnerable services were ready for exploitation. We found 1 web application that was vulnerable to many outside attacks. We found that the organization's password policy allows for users to reuse their accounts across multiple systems. We also found that the database that is stored on the local web application server is not encrypted, so any data stored in it is completely readable. So let's talk about some of the issues and why they are issues. The unpatched systems leave a bunch of vulnerable services and protocols ready to be exploited by a hacker. We found out-of-date operating systems, Windows XP and Windows 2008, which Microsoft will soon stop supporting. This means that if any problems arise with those operating systems, they will be unpatchable. On one of the servers, we found a vulnerable music streaming service called Icecast. We don't even believe this service is necessary in being used, as we saw no music or any sort of streaming files coming in or out of that server. We found a vulnerable web application on one of the Linux boxes running an Apache web server. On that same server, we found a bunch of unencrypted data, and we found that passwords could be reused. On the third server, we found some unnecessary protocols that are vulnerable to attack, such as SMB and RDP, which is remote desktop. So the reconnaissance phase. During this phase, no exploit just simply scanned the network segment to see what was there. We use a tool called Nmap to just gather basic information about those servers that were or were not connected to this network. We found 3 of them. There was a Windows 2008 server, a Linux server, and an unknown server, which we later discovered was running Windows XP. So let's talk about the attack narratives that we found. The Windows XP server was running a service called Icecast. We looked this up and found that this was a vulnerable media streaming service that was created in like 2002 and is no longer supported or used. We found this vulnerability through a Nessus scan. Then using Metasploit and 3 simple commands, oops, there's a typo. And 3 simple commands, we are able to get a meterpreter session. What the meterpreter session is basically a command shell straight into that server. So here's what the Icecast meterpreter session can do. From this session, we can issue file browsing commands such as ls, cd, pwd, and find. And at some point, we found the file. And we found that it had read-write permissions all across the board. Using Meterpreter, we were also able to download this file. Attack narrative 2, SQL injection vulnerability. On one of the servers we found running an Apache web service, we used the OWASP-zap tool to scan the server. With this tool, we found a URL that was vulnerable to SQL injection attacks. So we asked ourselves, how can we exploit this? We can use a tool called SQL Map. SQL Map allowed us to download contents from the web server's database. We used a simple command. This command also saved the contents to our local hard drive as CSV files. Here's an example of the users table that was dumped to our hard drive. You can see there's a lot of information in here. You see an ID, name, and a password that seems to be stored in clear text. Next, using a tool called Hydra, we can brute force a password crack against the server. Again, we just use a few simple commands and send Hydra a username and password combination and wait for it to do its work. And successfully, we find a successful username and password combination. We use this username and password to log in through SSH to the breached web server, and we find a file containing sensitive information. So another success. The third attack we easily discovered was this attack weighing in on the HTTP traversal and an unsecured folder vulnerability. We used a tool called DIR scanner to scan this web server, and we found a temp directory on it. So we decided to see what we could do with this temp directory. We simply clicked on this link, and it brings up this page. Then we click on this link that we find in this directory, because that looks to us like a vulnerable PHP shell. So voila, this is what we get. We clicked on the C99 PHP backdoor shell. And this opens up this nice GUI interface from which we can browse files on the web server, and we can download files on the web app server. So let's model some of these threats. Think about who could take advantage of the same things that we just did. An insider can steal all kinds of data with just Kali Linux and a few command lines. We demonstrated 3 attacks, but there are many more attacks that an insider could execute. An outsider, that is somebody who is coming from the World Wide Web and just using the internet to connect to the web app, can do several things. We found that they would be able to browse the web server, they can download files, and they can upload a backdoor. This is all due to the fact that the TMP directory lived within the website's directory structure, and that TMP directory was read, writable, accessible from just about everybody. So to recap the vulnerabilities that we found, we see that we have out-of-date operating systems with known vulnerabilities and end-of-life support. So these systems will be unpatchable even if they have vulnerabilities. We found a legacy IceCast music streaming service running on one of these vulnerable servers. We found a vulnerable web application with numerous misconfigurations, including a default unencrypted HTTP port 80. This web app server had that temp directory on it that was completely browsable from the World Wide Web. We found that the organization allowed users to reuse their passwords across multiple accounts. Actually, multiple systems. We found unencrypted passwords that were stored in a local hard drive. We found an unpatched Windows 2008 operating system. And we found several unpatched Windows services, including Simple Message Block and Remote Desktop Protocol. These services are vulnerable to a recent exploit called Bluekeep. So I think it's a good idea to patch them. So did we learn anything? The biggest lesson that we learned was that cooperation and clear communication led to prompt signatures on the Pentest plan and prompt delivery of testing results. We found that the target organization was well prepared. They provided us with everything we asked for, especially the requested IP access. What we found was that the time constraints were a little narrowly scoped, so it was difficult to finish long-running tasks within the time-constrained days and hours. What can we improve? Oops, we can't improve anything on this slide, so let's delete it. Okay, next steps, remediation. These tests are pretty simple, minus the web application vulnerabilities. That is probably the most complicated remediation.